So I thought I would do just a video on this 1936 Tokarev TT-33. So I believe this is the first full year of production for the TT-33. And they, of course, they transitioned from the TT-30 just a few years previously. And the TT-30 has a trigger that does not have that cutout at the top. So it's completely symmetrical if you look at it from the outside, and it has a removable backstrap, the TT-30 does, and the locking lugs on the barrel are a bit different than its transitional variants. But the TT-33 that we all know and love, and 1936 seems to have been the first full year. And you can see this one doesn't have the Tula star, but Ishevsk did not produce it until about 42 from what we know. So I have seen a few 1935 and 36 TT-33s that don't have this star. I don't know why that is, but you can see the slide, or the frame, matches the slide. And one of the reasons I got it is it had the matching magazine. And I think the finish, all things considered, is quite good, because oftentimes these have very, very poor finish. They have a high quality, well, not a high, I don't know if you'd call it a high quality, but it's a high gloss blued finish. But I don't think it's the best quality, because these are very often almost in the white. Almost all the finish is gone. Even if you look at pictures of these pistols in the war, it's very rare to find one when they're not in a holster. But often they seem to have a significant amount of finish wear on them. So, and there's just kind of a few bits on the operation of the gun. It's a very stiff magazine button. I did have a 1941 all matching, except the magazine, I had previously, and then I sold that when I got this. But has the same very stiff magazine button, not very ergonomic. And you have a lanyard loop on the magazine. It's kind of like those early 1911s. And then, of course, your slide stop. And there's no safety. There's a half cock, which is not really a safety. And it is single action, so has to be cocked. The sights I find to be quite good, all things considered. You know, most World War II pistols don't really have very good sights, but the TT-33, I think, is very, very good, has a very good sight picture. Not as good as maybe like a P-38, but if you compare it to some other pistols that have very poor sights, like a Luger, for example, I think it has one of the worst sights I've seen on a World War II pistol. But you can see there's basically no real markings on this side, although it has some proof stamps here and there. And finish wear on the top is more significant, but still pretty good. A lot of these have, like I said, a lot of finish issues to them. And you can see, just for those who are unaware, this is it's like a C-clip that retains the slide stop. So the slide stop is here, and the C-clip kind of rests on this rivet. So for disassembly, you want to knock that out. You can see someone's disassembled it in the past, of course. They always seem to have finish wear right here. Of course, extractor. The grip on the TT-33, on the TT series pistols, is not very good. The grip's very short, and it doesn't have much, really not much in the way of a back strap, so your hand kind of has a void when you hold it. But in the barrel, seems almost like brand new condition. There's actually a lot of grease on the inside, so I think that's helped preserve the finish of the barrel. You can see barrel bushing, kind of like on a 1911. It's a separate piece. And then, of course, you have the early style slide serrations. So practically all of the World War II ones will have this style, and most of the post-war ones will not. They'll have like a kind of a more of a basic style slide serration. So like on this 1911, the post-war Polish ones seem to use this style. The one in the Tokarev you use in Call of Duty 2 is actually a post-war Polish one. If you look at it in third person, They say it's a TT-30, but it's clearly a TT-33. Well, it does show the TT-30 trigger. I think that was more of like a rendering issue. But you can actually see the Polish markings on it and the import mark from Knoxville, Tennessee. And of course it has a TT-33 backstrap. But I don't have a Nagant revolver. That's really the main... No, I have the Luger, the P38, the Tokarev. The Nagant revolver is a big void, and I hope to fix that pretty soon. Then I'll have really the four main Eastern Front pistols. And I know the Germans use many different pistols, but the Luger and the P38 I consider really the most important. And then, because the Nagant revolver, there's a lot of internet lore that the revolvers were typically or nearly always issued a tank cruise, because when you fire out the pistol port, the barrel is not going to reciprocate like on an automatic pistol or a semi-automatic pistol, and cause malfunctions. But there are pictures of these with tank crews. I know there's some footage of like an ISU-152 tank commander motioning with one of these, and there's some other ones as well. But then the Nagant revolvers also seem to be issued to more of like, I want to say, people who are really not going to be using a pistol in self-defense, more like headquarters people. And that's not to say that headquarters people were not ever overrun, because of course they were, but these seem to have been issued to more frontline commanders, and even like generals. Like there's a picture of Pavel Belov, the famous cavalry corps commander. If you're not familiar with him, he led a cavalry corps and elements of an airborne brigade, airborne corps also. I think it was an airborne corps or brigade behind the German lines near Rzhev for about 6 or 7 months, and then they finally broke out, and that's a very interesting operation. And then he became commander of the 61st Army for the rest of the war. But definitely an interesting pistol. If you're interested in Eastern Front, of course, this is definitely a must-have pistol. This is something about the pre-war Soviet weapons I find interesting. They seem to be a bit higher quality, of course, and as you would expect, but interesting. I think like this being in 1936, in 1939 or 1943, who would have had this in their possession, or even in like 1978, where this was. I'm assuming this was in the U.S. by that time, but definitely an interesting piece.